In this video, we're going to look at good and bad examples of introductory paragraphs for an argument rebuttal essay. And I have a topic here, should affirmative action programs for college admission be maintained or should they be eliminated? And that's similar to the kind of topics that you'll write about for your argument rebuttal essays because it's a two-sided pro-con issue. So let's take a look at each one of these lettered examples. And as we come to each one, you can pause the video, read it, think about how effective it is, and then you come back and hear my commentary. All right, example A is a bad example. It starts with a little definition, which can be okay if you need to explain what something is, but it doesn't really establish that there's a controversy about affirmative action. It sort of just sounds like an informational essay explaining what it is, when what we're really doing here is explaining that, or need to be doing, is explain that there's an issue about affirmative action. And then it isn't until the end here, this whole part here to me just reminds me of an encyclopedia entry. It's just purely informative with no sense of establishing an issue, much less naming it or framing it. Here, they sort of pose a question, which could be maybe the naming it of an issue, but then they never have a thesis where they take a stance on the issue, say which side they're on, or give their reasons. So that's not a good example there. All right, let's look next at example B. You can pause the video and then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, this one is also a bad example. It's a little better than A because I can tell this stance. It's saying affirmative action should be ended, but it starts right with the stance without giving any context, without explaining the issue, what the two sides are. So it's very disoriented to read that, just starting with that. And then after that, this again is just sort of kind of an informational history, which doesn't do anything to explain the issue or say what the two sides are. It's just kind of rambling and it makes you wonder where the essay is going. And then it sort of repeats the stance again here. This is sort of just a little bit, a fuller version of the thesis. Affirmative action should be ended. And then it gives the reasons, and the reasons are very vague. Lack of need, issues of fairness, impact on minorities themselves. I can't tell what that means. What is lack of need? Need what? What is the issue of fairness? What exactly is the impact on minorities? So the reasons aren't specific enough for me to understand them. All right, let's next look at C, and we can pause the video and then come back and hear my comments on it. All right, this is our good example here in C. So it starts out in the first 4 sentences here, right here, and I'm going to put that in green, with a story that establishes the context. And it's a good story because it's clearly about affirmative action. That's what it all comes down to at the end. It gets the reader emotionally involved, right? You feel bad for Abigail Fisher having this happen to her. And it also makes it clear that there's an issue here. This is not just a neutral, informative kind of opening. It's talking about something that people could argue over. You know, you get the sense there's a debate here. And then after that, we name the issue, get our name it and frame it. So this is the sentence that names it. Maybe I'll put that in blue, right? This story, right, so a little transition, has begun to raise a question of whether affirmative action should still be used. So that's the issue, and it uses the word whether, right? You can use should or whether here, saying, well, that's the question. That's what people are debating. It's very important to stop before you frame it and say, here's the question. This is the issue we're debating. People have to know that. And again, using the word should or whether helps. All right, then we're framing it. So we're going to get the first side. So in that sentence here, I'll put that maybe in purple, we hear what the supporters say, and we use that signaling language, supporters of affirmative action such as, and then we give the name and credential of the person, and then give a quote from that person that explains that side. And then we have a little transition, and we get the other side of the issue here. And I'll put that in orange. Maybe I'm running out of colors here. So this explains the other side using that signaling language. Opponents believe this with a name and a quote. And then most importantly, we get to the thesis, which I'll put in red. And after a little transition, we get the stance, right? This program should no longer be used. And you want something that's very, very clear about which side you're on. And it's very clear that that person is against affirmative action being used. And it uses the word should in there, right? Should not be used in effect. So using a should or should not in the stance is very helpful in making your side clear. And then we have the word because leading into the reasons, right? So these are the reasons here, and I will underline them. It can no longer be justified by actual examples of discrimination. It does not meet the test of fairness, and it does not benefit minorities in the long run. So those are nice, specific reasons. I can actually tell what each one of those is. Just the first one, for example. Well, it's saying there's no actual examples of discrimination in college admission today, anyway, that would justify that. That's what they're arguing anyway. And all of these are very parallel, right? They're all clauses beginning with it, and then a verb, and so it's all nice and parallel. So that's our good example there. Let's look at the last one in D. So pause the video and then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, this is another bad example. Now, you can tell what stance they're on, kind of, but it's all mixed in through the paragraph, right? There's really no structure, organization here. The whole paragraph is just like one long thesis without the thesis being boiled down and unified into a single sentence at the end that people can focus on and take in, right? And it has a lot more detail in here than you want to have in your intro. So it's kind of confusing and muddled in a sense because we can't really focus on, all right, here is the stance and these are the reasons. Also, there was never any framing of the issue, any discussion of what the two sides were. So it's kind of disorienting to read this. It's a lot harder than if you had just, as in our good example, said, here's the issue, here are the two sides, and then said, here's my side where I am and my reasons at the end in one clear thesis statement. All right, so these are all examples, good and bad, of argument, rebuttal, introductions. And if you want to review the organizational structure for how to set that up, you can look at the previous video.